Good morning, Lord Mayor, Minister, fellow speakers. Good morning, Lord Mayor, Minister, fellow speakers and our attendees tuning in online, and welcome to the Ireland Innovation Day 2021, here from Dublin Castle. On behalf of Huawei and Dublin Chamber, I'd like to welcome all of you who are joining us from home or from home offices or from work. And sorry that circumstances haven't allowed us to all meet in person today. My name is Anne O'Dea. I'm CEO of Silicon Republic and I'm your MC for the morning. So now, without further ado, would you please welcome, and we're delighted to have him with us this morning, our Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage, Minister Darragh O'Brien.
Thank you very much. Thanks indeed. Thank you very much, Anne, for that kind introduction. And Díomh go léir agus míle buíochas as ucht an cura chun labhairt libh inniu Cashlan all clia. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. And I would especially like to thank Dublin Chamber and its partner Huawei and Tony, who I've met, and his team from Huawei, for successfully hosting this European Innovation Day 2021 here in Dublin Castle. And I'd also like to recognise the presence as well of our Lord Mayor Alison Gilliland and to welcome her here this morning too. The theme of this year's event is Innovate for a Sustainable Europe, and I really want to commend the organisers for choosing such a very important but very apt subject for this Innovation Day here today. And while I have no doubt you'll hear from many information and communication technology professionals, sustainability is really a matter that requires everyone pulling in the same direction. As Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage, I see the need every single day for innovation, for sustainability, upskilling and for female leadership, some of the topics that you today will be discussing. Innovation and increased digital adoption have undoubtedly been taking place in the Irish construction sector for many years, particularly in the leading firms. But we do still have scope and challenge in promoting a greater culture of innovation and digital adoption, particularly in the SMEs and the smaller subcontractors in the construction sector, as well as on the client side. And this has a potential to deliver really, really significant gains for the industry. In Housing for All, our new government housing plan that we launched in early September, the first housing plan that any government has launched, it's fully supported and fully funded on a multi-annual basis. This plan sets out, we detail a number of steps of what we are going to do to ensure levels of productivity and innovation actually materialise, and that we work on the basis of pushing forward with innovation and best practice in the construction and the home building sector. The new Construction Technology Centre, which will be led by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, will prioritise residential construction for its first 3 years in operation, supporting innovation, modern methods of construction, and digital and manufacturing technologies. Key performance indicators for modern methods of construction will be developed, and funding for research and innovation will be increased to a level that's commensurate with the scale of construction in the domestic economy by 2024, which will be very significant if one looks at the Housing for All plan, €20 billion plus in direct state funding, our National Development Plan, €165 billion. So the big focus is obviously on increasing our productivity, delivering 33,000 new homes per year, 300,000 homes by the end of 2030, and delivering very important strategic infrastructural projects through our National Development Plan. So when you look at the scale of that investment, and then we see what we have to do on the innovation side, our research piece will be commensurate with that very significant investment that the state is making. The Department of Higher and Further Education have really ambitious plans to overhaul the apprenticeship system, and you've seen some of that happening already, developing a plan to increase apprenticeships to about 10,000 per annum. And thankfully, actually this year, real progress and the signs are actually very good that we'll be moving towards meeting those targets in the coming years. But we will include targeted supports to encourage participation, particularly for underrepresented groups in the construction sector. The department as well, they've opened 4 new retrofitting centres of excellence to train people in retrofitting A big challenge for us here in this country. We will need to retrofit 500,000 homes by 2030, but that provides real opportunities for new skills, innovations, upskilling, and indeed getting those unrepresented or underrepresented groups into the sector itself. We've actually opened 4 new retrofitting centres of excellence, training people in retrofit skills, including nearly zero energy buildings. And as Minister with responsibility to solve the housing crisis, I can absolutely assure you I'm always open to working with people and organisations on solutions. Dublin Chamber's sister organisation, for example, Chambers Ireland, recently had a very interesting commentary on vacant properties, another matter that we will tackle under our Housing for All plan. They've suggested, Chambers Ireland that is, empowering local authorities as one-stop shops to support change of use and above-shop projects. They've also suggested on a national level that we could further strengthen compulsory purchase powers and introduce a vacancy tax to encourage these homes to be used. This challenge of vacancy does require the kind of innovation that you will be speaking about today. And this is an area that requires attention and urgent attention. And I, as Minister for Housing, will be taking on board many of those points that Chambers Ireland have covered within their report and bringing them into real action. As I've said, it does help when everyone's pulling together in the one direction. And I really want to thank Chambers Ireland and Dublin Chamber for their thoughts on these matters. As you will all know, Government have recently published our Climate Action Plan with a commitment to reduce emissions from construction and the housing sector by between 40 and 45%. According to the Irish Green Building Council, the building and construction sector is responsible for about 39% of global carbon emissions. However, innovation in construction and manufacturing sectors is already reducing the sector's carbon footprint in some areas, but we have a lot more to do in this space. I recently had the honour of signing on behalf of the government a Memorandum of Understanding which establishes Enniscorthy's High Performance Building Alliance as a designated UN Centre of Excellence, the very first one in this country and one of only 10 in the world. A real honour, and it just shows that we are at the forefront of innovation in building, but we need to actually expand that right across that becomes common practice in our sector. I also visited the NZEB Centre in Enniscorthy in early September, and I was actually seriously impressed by what I saw and by the training environment that was there and the upskilling of people into this particular area and training them in best practice and best skills. The European Environment and Information and Observation Network published a report in July of this year showing how the digital sector can contribute to the European Green Deal and to the reduction of manufacturing sector's environmental impact. For example, they note that the digital product passport is one solution foreseen by many EU strategies. The digital product passport would allow the recording and management of all information related to the composition and life cycle of a product, which would help the manufacturing industry repair, refurbish or recycle equipment. And it is a really impressive initiative and one that I earnestly hope will be taken on board. However, some advancements in technology will increase energy demand, and that is certainly true, and we need to be cognizant of that. So it's imperative that we develop holistic solutions that don't rely entirely on technological advancements. We will need to bring more people into the field to provide different perspectives, which is necessary for innovation. Just in conclusion, I do believe as well that we must do everything we can to encourage more of our students to take up STEM programmes and to support women in tech. As Minister for Housing, I'm very anxious to see a much more diverse construction sector, and it's only by full participation of all in society that we can actually get the solutions and meet the challenges of the future, but I'm confident that we will. We do sit at the precipice of another global challenge, which is climate change, and how we act today will affect how people will live in the very near future, how our sons and daughters will live. So policymakers and innovators like you need to do everything that we can to support each other, to make sure we go down the right path and create the right future for Ireland and Ireland in Europe. I again want to thank Dublin Chamber and Huawei for hosting me today, and Huawei in particular for the sponsorship of this excellent event, and to wish everyone all the very best in what I am certain is going to be a very interesting and important, and most importantly, innovative day. Go to meet with.
Thank you very much, Minister, for being with us today. Wonderful context for the panels we're going to have this morning, so thank you very much.
Welcome.
Next, we're going to hear from Huawei's Vice President of Corporate Communications, based in Shenzhen, Carl Sung.
Good morning, dear Lord Mayor, Minister, and guest. Welcome to Huawei Ireland Innovation Day. It is exciting to see that live event are back, with safety measures in place. At the same time, digital technology is shaping the event to a wider audience. Today, I'm happy to join you online to share how Huawei think about technology innovation and the future development of digital economy. Digital technology is reshaping the world. Efforts are underway to develop the digital economy and promote digital inclusion and sustainable growth all over the world. So far, more than 170 countries have released a national digital strategy. Recently, two developments have reminded us that green and digital transformation is now more real and urgent than ever. First, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, digitalization has accelerated. Over the last 2 years, global network traffic has increased by 50%. Demand for home broadband grows by 20% in 2020 alone. Today, innovative digital applications such as remote work, online education, and telemedicine have become the new normal. Second, the whole world is paying more attention to carbon emission and climate change. The EU aims to become carbon neutral by 2050. Ireland has announced to plan to cut 51% of the carbon emission by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. With this emerging global consensus on carbon neutrality, we are seeing more and more industry and countries embracing green and low-carbon sustainable development. In this process, technology innovation, especially digitalization and intelligence, will be the key. According to the World Economic Forum, by 2030, ICT will help reduce industrial emission by 12.1 billion tons. This is 10 times greater than the emission created by the ICT industry itself. Huawei's mission and vision is to bring the digital to every person, home, and organization for a fully connected, intelligent world. I believe helping industries and countries go digital and reduce their carbon footprint is an important part of this mission. Here in Ireland, Huawei is committed to driving the digital and green transformation through ongoing innovation. Huawei has operated in Ireland for 17 years. Together with our customers and partners, we have contributed to the development of the digital infrastructure here, connecting more than 3 million people across the country. Over the next 2 years, Huawei will invest €80 million in Ireland to support our ongoing technology innovation and boost the local digital economy. We believe that to address climate change, the digital economy must be a green economy. ICT technology applied in the energy sector can drive the development of clean and renewable energy in Ireland, particularly given this country's big potential for offshore wind energy. Huawei is working to converge digital and power electronic technology and develop digital energy services, using bit to manage watt. Our focus include clean power generation, electronic transportation, green ICT infrastructure, and smart energy storage. We provide low carbon and even zero carbon energy solutions for a range of industry to facilitate sustainable development. In the digital economy, talent will be key to digital transformation and economy growth. Through our Seeds for the Future program and various scholarship, we are working with university and scholars to build a robust digital talent ecosystem. In Ireland, our initiatives are giving women and men equal opportunities to improve their skill set to become more competitive in the digital economy. Huawei believes that openness, collaboration, and shared success is a way forward for the world. We view Ireland as a strategic partner and will stay open and collaborative to continue promoting the development of local communities. Over the coming decades, we will work with industry partners around the world to make even more contributions to the low carbon and digital development of Ireland and Europe as a whole, ultimately building the green and inclusive, intelligent world. Thank you very much.
And now, thank you everybody. And now to the last of our welcome addresses this morning. I'm delighted to introduce the CEO of Dublin Chamber, Mary Rose Burke.
Hello, my name is Mary Rose Burke. I'm CEO of Dublin Chamber of Commerce, and I'm delighted to participate in today's Huawei Innovation event. It's a great opportunity to share and to learn from each other, and I know there's a fantastic lineup of speakers, and I hope you all have a wonderful day at this event. I know there's also international colleagues from Huawei as part of the European Innovation Day, so welcome to all of those participants as well. It's no doubt that business is having a very challenging time at the moment over the last 18 months. But the real lesson from COVID-19 for me has been about the resilience of business over the last year. Businesses have adapted to new working practices and met those challenges head on. And in spite of those challenges, business is optimistic about the future. In our latest Q3 survey of our business members, it shows that 51% of firms expect profits to rise in the next 3 months. And this is a very steady trend, up from 44% in Q2 and 31% in Q1. Even more enlightening, I think, is that the number of businesses who expect their profits to drop in the next 3 months has fallen to only 4%, which is a very significant decline from 10% in Q2 and 28% in Q1. So that optimism and resilience for me is built, I suppose, on the back of innovation and collaboration. And I think the big success of COVID has been the demonstrable impact of collaboration between big and small companies, between public and private sector, where the regulatory environment, where finance is available to support innovation in meeting head on the COVID challenge. And I anticipate that where we harness all of those synergies supported by technology, supply chains, innovation and collaboration, we will also meet head on the looming challenge of climate change. We see companies responding to that climate change, in many cases ahead of what national governments are doing. And this is where customers are seeking, or companies are seeking competitive advantage, responding to the desires of their customers, following their staff, and also following their investor in terms of demands on business to go green. And while we know that this change is more prevalent and more advanced in larger firms, it's now trickling down to smaller firms. And partly as smaller firms seek to make sure they're not excluded from procurement tender processes, either in large businesses or public sector, but to be able to fully participate in global supply chains. In Dublin Chamber, we're helping small firms to move from awareness to action on this journey through our Sustainability Academy sponsored by AIB. And we see that people are embracing the opportunity to review their business practices and build sustainable practices into those. So one big element that's going to impact sustainability and sustainability of our cities in so many ways will be the trend towards remote and hybrid working. Again, in our Q3 surveys, 8 out of 10 businesses have reported that they'll offer some type of hybrid off-site and remote working in the coming year. So the role of the office and working patterns is going to change. All of those will have changes not yet fully understood for how our cities operate, how our public transport and infrastructure and housing operates. But I have every confidence that in the same spirit of collaboration, innovation, of bringing the power and might of businesses, big and small, together to address the challenges, we can learn a lot from our experience of COVID, and we can take those learnings into how we work together to address other problems, whether it's around gender diversity, participation of women in technology, and in dealing with problems of climate change. I know you're going to discuss an awful lot more of that as the day goes on, so thank you for the invitation to participate and enjoy the session. Thank you, bye-bye.
Feel free to clap. Thank you, Mary Rose. So next up, we have our first keynote of the morning. Here to launch the brand new Digital Sustainability Report, please welcome the Chairman of Amoric Research, Gerard O'Neill.
Thank you, Anne. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning to launch the Huawei report on Ireland's digital path to sustainability, printed on recycled paper, I hasten to add. I think this is a wonderfully timely opportunity to discuss some of these issues and to really check in with Irish businesses who are going to have to play such an important part in delivering Ireland's ambitious climate CO2 emission reduction targets. So what I want to do is take you through some of the key findings in terms of the content of the report and the different findings that came through to us from our survey of 300 different businesses. I hope you can see that there, yes. So we have three parts to the study. First of all, in terms of the sustainability journey, where are businesses today in 2021 in terms of their own pathway towards a sustainable future. Then looking at the part digital sustainability might play in that, talking to business leaders about, for example, the part of digital technologies in achieving their own goals. And finally, zooming out to a bigger look at the digital impact in terms of what difference could digital technologies and innovation make to achieving Ireland's climate goals. If I look at the first part of this in terms of the sustainability journey, first of all, when you talk to business leaders about the benefits of sustainability compliance, embracing sustainability goals, what you find are a number of key factors stand out in particular. First of all, they do think that if they are more efficient in terms of the way in which they use technology to achieve their goals, it will actually save them money. And I think that's an important part of the message. This is not just a sacrifice people are making in businesses. This, in fact, is something businesses are doing in order to run their businesses more efficiently and effectively. But the second highest point there is around compliance and regulations. And I think this is something that comes up quite a lot. Remember some of the sectors we spoke to, energy, agri-food, those are sectors that are now highly regulated and increasingly regulated. So using technologies, digital tools to more smartly respond to some of those requirements is something they're all looking at. And they look at other things as well, for example, recruitment. So 82% think it will actually play a part in terms of getting the right staff into their organizations. So in terms of the actual progress towards the digital future, the journey people are at, this is an important chart because it tells you where businesses are today in terms of where they think they are on their own digital pathway or journey, and where they think they might be in 3 years' time. And if you look at two parts of that pie chart, the red and the orange, those are the people in our survey who said, we are almost at the end, or in fact, we're so good, we are an example to everybody else. As you can see, it's a very small percentage in 2021. However, when we ask people to look ahead, 3 years, maybe 4 or 5 years down the road, where might they be in the journey? You can see that the orange and the red bars, those who expect to be well progressed, has almost tripled in size over that period of time. I think this is important because what it's really telling us is that Businesses don't just see sustainability as something they pay lip service to. They don't see sustainability as something that is a nice to have, but actually they're quite happy to park it when other priorities arise. In fact, what they're really telling us is that sustainability is going to be an integral part of their strategy and growth plans for the coming years, in the next few years, not just 2030 or further afield. So, what part might technology play in achieving this? What I think is interesting is that when we ask people about the different digital tools that could be part of delivering those ambitions to get further ahead in the sustainability journey, what we find is that there is quite a diverse mix of tools that are identified by respondents from all the different sectors in our survey. And you can see there's no one technology stands out. So, for example, 5G is there, cloud is there, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, a whole range of technologies and applications of technologies appear to be part of the consideration set for business leaders nowadays in terms of how they're going to achieve their goals. But I think it's important to recognize that that variety tells us that they're still looking for guidance or looking for advice. They're looking to identify the 1, 2, maybe 3 key digital tools that will help them achieve their goals. And it may be different for different businesses, for different sectors. But there are also challenges in the way of getting to the digital future. So, for example, when we ask people about concerns they might have about their IT investments, well, actually, number one is security, because we are moving into a more hybrid, networked, interconnected business environment and way of working for organizations, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And certainly when we talk to the people in our survey about the concerns they might have in relation to delivering on these goals, you can see security is there, but also so are simple considerations around return on investment. How much is this going to cost me? And what am I going to get in return in terms of that investment? But there are other considerations as well. For example, the impact on brand, the impact on even just what is the best one to achieve your sustainability outcome, but also around concerns over staffing. Have we got the skill set, the knowledge base, the capabilities for innovation to deliver our ambitions if we really want to get further along the sustainability journey? So it tells us that we capture a set of answers or a view from the business community at a point in time, after COP26 when they're thinking, we've got to do this, we want to do this, but how will we do it? The really important thing as well is that it's not just about the micro level of the firm and the business and the organization. It's also a macro story. And one of the things that we've set out to do in some detail in the report is look at the contribution potentially of digital to delivering Ireland's climate change goals. First of all, we have to recognise that digital itself is an enormous part of the future global economy. So 60% of the world's GDP will be the digital economy in just a couple of years' time. Digital transformation spend will reach about 7 billion in 2023. And just to put that in context, that's way up there with the energy sector, or indeed the building sector in terms of levels of investment. So that's going to have an impact. It's not all focused on digital or sustainability, but it is going to have a huge impact. And also from a World Economic Forum report, those businesses that connect digital innovation and investment with their sustainability goals are going to grow at 2.5 times the rate of those organizations that don't make that connection, don't invest in lining up and tying up their sustainability and digital ambitions. So, what does this mean then in terms of Ireland's climate change goals? Only earlier this month, the government published its report on its climate action plan, which set out very ambitious, steep targets for delivering Ireland's goal of reducing CO2 emissions by 50% in 2030 relative to the 2005 benchmark. So that's a huge task. We're already progressing towards it, but it is a hugely ambitious goal. And what you see in the report, and we've captured this in our own report, is that every different sectors are going to contribute differently to achieving those goals. And the government actually sets out a range of possible contributions in terms of CO2 emission reductions, whether it's in the building sector, and the Minister alluded to the amount of building that is anticipated for housing in the next number of years, whether it's in industry, whether it's in energy production itself, whether it's in agri, or even land use. All of these different sectors have the potential to contribute enormous reductions in CO2 emissions in order to achieve our goal of a 50% reduction by 2030. But there's a range there. And the reason there's a range is because even looking ahead to 2030, there is a potential for different digital tools and other solutions to have a bigger impact perhaps than anticipated for each of those sectors. So there is a degree of uncertainty there, a variance in terms of forecast reductions. And what we looked at in our research was, well, what part could digital have in delivering these goals? And it's very significant. If you look at the Digital Europe report from earlier, from last month in fact, what they say is that digital technologies and innovations have the potential to deliver a 20% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030 on their own. 20%. So that's 20% of our 50% target already. So that's about 40%, give or take, of the total target coming from digital solutions and innovations and tools. And what we find is that if you take that 20% figure, and by the way, there's a range of estimates from 15% up to 25%, so we've kind of taken a middle course here. But if you look at how that might actually manifest itself in terms of real savings, in terms of reduction in CO2 emissions, you can see that on a sector-by-sector basis, if we take the lower end of the reduction from the government climate action plan and the higher end, then in total, digital technologies have the potential to contribute a 9 to 13, or nearly 10 to 13 million tons of carbon emission reductions by 2030. So it's a huge contribution to our very ambitious goals. And that is why it is essential that the debate about our climate plan and the debate about the part of business in it ties into it a conversation about digital innovation and digital tools and technologies. And so I suppose to conclude, what this tells us is that businesses are not just paying lip service to sustainability. I think there's a perception out there that businesses will talk the talk of climate change and sustainability, but they won't walk the talk. But in fact, the businesses and the business leaders we've spoken to in the course of this research are prepared to walk the talk. And they see digital tools and technologies as a key part in actually delivering their own business ambitions and goals in the short, medium and long term. So I think that that's something that's reassuring. I think it's something we need to embrace because it tells us that on the basis of the Huawei report being launched today, Irish businesses will play and are prepared to play a critical part in delivering Ireland's climate change ambitions. Thank you.
Jared, thanks so much for that. If you'd like to come and join us, and I'll invite the rest of the panellists up. So if you'd like to join me on stage, please, Orla Birmingham, Sustainability Manager at SSE Electricity, Tina Raleigh, Head of Offshore Ireland at Statkraft, and Ian O'Hora, Head of Engineering and Green Economy at IDA Ireland. You're all very welcome to the first panel this morning. Great to see you all in person. I'm going to kick off by, I think you'll all be clear who Jared is by now, but just for those watching at home who might not know the rest of you, can I just ask the three of you to give us a little short introduction to yourselves and your organisations, and I suppose particularly in the context of sustainability.
Oh, thanks, Anne. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Orla Birmingham, and I'm the Sustainability Manager for SSE. So SSE is one of Ireland's largest energy utilities. We supply 100% green electricity to homes and businesses, as well as natural gas and essential services. We operate over 890 megawatts of wind farms on the island of Ireland, both north and south, and SSE Renewables is building more offshore than anyone else in the world right now. So net zero is fundamental to our purpose, vision and strategy. We are committed to building the infrastructure needed to achieve net zero and to supporting businesses and customers with the transition. So we've also been expanding our energy services offering across the island of Ireland.
Thanks a million, Orla. And speaking of offshore, can we come to you, Tina?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tina Raleigh, and I'm the head of offshore with Statkraft Ireland. Statkraft Ireland have been in Ireland since 2018, and Statkraft is the largest producer of renewable energy in Europe. So we have hydropower plants, we have solar power plants, we have onshore wind, and more recently we're getting into the market of offshore wind, which is a really exciting emerging industry here in Ireland. So on the island of Ireland we have onshore, we have solar and grid services that we help with EirGrid.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Tina. And Ian.
Morning. Morning, everybody. My name is Ian O'Hora. I lead IDA Ireland's engineering and sustainability team. IDA Ireland, we work with companies from around the world. We encourage them and talk to them about investing in Ireland. And the sustainability team within that is about a new part of our strategy where we grow businesses in Ireland in a sustainable way. So they make a positive contribution to the economy, they decarbonise the environment, and they are businesses of the future.
And it's a relatively new unit within IDA, am I right?
Very much. It's part of our new strategy, which we launched earlier this year. While we would have worked on sustainability previously, in a structured way, we've put it very much at the centre of our strategy, sustainability and the future and recovery.
Great to hear. Jared, I think people will be fairly familiar with you, but if you want to tell us just a little bit more about Amoric for anybody, any of our international viewers who might not know you.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Well, Amoric is an Irish-based independent company. We specialise in strategic research projects. We look at issues including sustainability, as well as financial services and other sectors. And we have a great team who together deliver a range of both business-to-business and consumer surveys in Ireland and internationally.
Fantastic. Look, the research was great. It's incredibly timely. But one of the things that came out of COP26 was very much that idea that business has a responsibility now to really play a role in bringing those numbers down. You were saying at the end you felt that it was quite genuine, that it wasn't lip service. Tell me more about that. What made you feel that businesses are really getting it, A, and B, do you think they get the urgency of it?
Well, I think it's fair to say we've been researching business attitudes to climate change, environment and sustainability probably about 15 or more years at this stage. And to be honest, in the past, and I mean even the recent past, 5 years ago, it wasn't really coming up as the lead or central focus of most of the businesses we spoke to. But this report, and similar ones that I've seen, say that now businesses see sustainability as a number one medium to long-term objective for their business. It's not a nice to have anymore. They need to have it because not only in terms of regulation and compliance and the wider climate change goals, but also because the competitors are embracing it, their customers are demanding it, their suppliers are also looking to deliver more of it. So sustainability is part of the way in which businesses do business. It's no longer optional. It's something that has to be central to strategy and decision making. And the majority, I'm glad to say, of the business leaders we surveyed agree that is their number one priority at the moment.
Oh, it's great to hear. And just coming to yourself, Orla, I know SSE, because I'm just starting off a little bit with COP26, just because it was so recent, so relevant. If I'm correct, SSE were a principal partner on COP26. Can you tell me a little bit about the feelings of SSE, of what came out of COP26?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, when we look at the final agreed text in the cold light of day, there are reasons to be optimistic that the 1.5 degree pathway target remains just about alive. So there was understandable disappointment that further headway wasn't made, such as an agreement by China and India on coal phase out, and there is a gap between the longer term commitments and the short term action. But we have to emphasise that COP is now a bigger event than just the text and the negotiations. There were complementary agreements to the main text that were significant in themselves. And as an event, COP brings together a diverse range of stakeholders from across businesses, NGOs, civil society, cities and other non-state actors. And we've seen bold commitments from both governments and the private sector. So, when governments set the direction and the framework, private sector can deliver. So it's about ambition, it's about action, and it's also about accountability. So as SSE, we've been really delighted to see that COP this year is recognising wider impacts of climate change. So there's been a huge focus on nature and on the just transition, which we haven't really seen before, both of which are very key areas for SSE. So the just transition itself is essential for securing public legitimacy for net zero. It's a framework that gives us confidence that the social consequences of the energy transition in terms of economic opportunity, green jobs, consumer fairness and affordability will be equitably distributed and nobody will be left behind.
I like it. It's very much one of our themes today, so that's
Sorry,
great to hear.
If I could just jump in there as well, just on the whole COP26, it really brought it to the forefront of people's minds.
I agree.
My kids were coming home from school saying, this is what I learned, what happened today at COP26. Like, that's phenomenal, you've kids under the age of 10 coming home at the dinner table, having this conversation, and they're the drivers, they're the reason we're doing all of this. So it's brilliant. I just thought it was fantastic from that aspect. Absolutely disappointing in other regimes, but to bring it forward like that.
I think that's a really good point, because it's easy to be pessimistic after something like COP26. We know it was a struggle to get even what we got. I think it's a really good point. I remember covering COP16, but I think it was the first COP that I would have covered. It feels like yesterday, and it's quite remarkable how little people knew then, and I think you're spot on, right down to kids know about it now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exciting times.
Hopefully it is. Speaking of which, Tina, I think it was your own StatCraft CEO, Rinnick Tonnerson, that after COP26 he said the energy transition is the best weapon we have to fight a steadily warming planet. Tell me a little bit about what we're doing in Ireland. You're very involved in onshore, offshore. Are we doing enough? Tell me a bit about regulation, legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ireland has really challenging ambitions. You've got the Climate Action Plan, which now increased from the 70% of electricity from renewable sources up to 80%. And that's a significant number. We have an ambition of 5 gigawatts of offshore. When you consider we only have 25 megawatts connected to the grid system at the moment, to achieve that in less than what will be next year, 9 years, is a significant amount of time. But the government are doing a huge amount. For the first time ever, we now have the Maritime Area Planning Bill. That's nearly through the door. They expect that to be enacted by the end of the year. And that's really exciting. So for the first time ever, you're going to have this new management system of our maritime area. And the last one was the foreshore bill, which was like in the 1930s. So it was well antiquated, well out of date. So now we'll have something that's fit for purpose. It'll help us with our ambitions. But are things moving fast enough? I'm not so sure that they are. There's going to be an offshore res auction that'll be held probably next year also, and that will give us the vehicle and the route to market for all these offshore projects. There is a huge amount of ambition from all the developers, SSE, ourselves and others. We all have great plans for what's happening in the offshore market, but it's moving slowly. Yeah. So it will be a challenge. It is a challenge, but we're up for it.
Okay, good to hear. Good to hear. So you like what you're seeing in the MAP bill, yes?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Like it took there was the MAFA, there was the MPDM, and eventually it came to the MAP bill. So basically, it'll manage our whole marine environment. When it comes to the likes of ourselves, when we go to submit a planning application for an offshore wind farm, it'll go to the one at the moment on board Panola, and ultimately there'll be new MARA, the Maritime Area Regulatory Authority, that'll be set up to manage and enforce all these new consenting processes that'll be there. It's a new two-step process where you'll apply for a MAC, which is a Maritime Area Consent, in advance of submitting your planning application. So a lot more regulated, which is good. And the policy is there, the bills are there. You have the National Marine Planning Framework, which is also launched earlier this year. So all the building pieces are there. yeah, it's just to finalise them and get the secondary legislation out there so we can all move on and progress.
Yeah, and just before I go to Ian, the environmental impact, we were talking about it with Orla there, about nature as well, came out very much, and biodiversity came out through COP26.
Yeah.
What about the environmental impact and people's concerns about that, about, when it comes to maritime?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been working in the renewable sector for over 13 years now, and if I look back at the first, what they're now called environmental impact assessment report that I did, it was maybe 100, 120 pages. We have now grown so much, and I suppose in our assessments, in our understanding of the environment, and also people's expectations of the level of detail and the assessments that we must go into. I tell you now, I can fill up a room full of paper with what's included in an EIAR these days. So there's a huge amount of work to go into one, a huge amount of assessments, but the expertise is there. There's, especially if we look to our UK partners, like they're old hats at doing offshore renewables at this stage. So a lot of us will partner with the expertise that's in the UK market and build on that within the Irish market. So there's a lot of very capable consultants out there, capable of doing all these EIAs for us. But I suppose as part of the digital transition, we should be looking at digital EIAs and moving everything online, reducing the need for paper, for printing paper, the room full of papers that associate any planning application to the board. Things like virtual consultation rooms, they're also important as part of our EIA process.
You just answered my next question.
I might just add to that, one of the opportunities around digital in this space as well is looking at how we can bring AI, for example, into species monitoring. So, just last year we've piloted puffin monitoring, which is really exciting for SSE, but it just means that always the boundaries are just being pushed more and more, trying to recognise what are the opportunities, how can we bring these technologies together and look for that kind of common goal as well. So, the opportunities are just growing, which is great to see.
I'll have to hear more about the puffin monitoring. It's a big bird watch. I'll meet you afterwards to hear more about that. Ian, moving on to yourself and coming back a little bit to business, because I think a lot of the people that Gerard would have been talking to would have been Irish businesses and maybe smaller businesses. These big multinational companies that the IDA is looking at, your current clients and your hopefully future clients. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit just about how much climate action is impacting what you're doing. You mentioned already, relatively new unit, etc. But just tell me a little bit more about the IDA.
So, maybe to tie it all together, I think there's a consistency between everybody from an ambition perspective, what everybody, each of us individually at home in our families, but also then in our workplace and then in our business leadership and decision making. It's all linked together. So when we look at a global foreign direct investment environment, from an Ireland perspective and an IDA perspective, we target and we work with some of the leading companies in the best sectors or the growing sectors, the sectors that will have most impact on technology, the sector that will have most impact on healthcare and how we live and work in our day-to-day lives. So those ambitious companies are matching the ambition of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. So that's a real positive, which kind of puts us in a really strong position in terms of what Ireland wants to do from an industry perspective. So we have leaders in Ireland who are, automating their businesses. They're investing in digitization. They are connecting with their staff in terms of the staff's ambition, and they're aligning their goals and objectives with the sustainability. What each of those companies know is that it's difficult. So the medium to long term, I think there's a clear visibility of what we all want to do. It's the challenge in the short term of how do you build those pieces of business. And what IDA is working with companies now, and my team, we're working with companies now, is how can we support you to have an impact and do things faster? So how can you invest in R&D right now? How do you upskill your staff? How do you train your staff? And how do you decarbonize the environment that you have? So your direct emissions, your supply chain emissions, and your contribution then to the circular economy. So how I would describe the clients is very ambitious. There are things that we need to do now to put the pieces together and to thread the needle. And right now, all of our companies are working together collaboratively in some instances, working with different agencies and working with SFI and people like that to actually create some momentum, get the ball underway.
And just on I was talking to Martin Shannon recently, and I think we had this discussion. He was saying, because everyone talks about tax and the 15% and all the rest of it, he was saying really the number one question they always get is around talent. And I'm thinking for attracting those amazing companies into Ireland who, will have the technologies of tomorrow that's going to help us with, climate and energy. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Sure.
Are we in a good place or not?
So technology tomorrow means the skills of tomorrow. So you have to match it off in any competitive environment. But particularly, a healthy kind of future-orientated society, we have to build and educate our people and work with them so that we're growing in line with the demands of society. So right across the system, and by system I mean what we're doing from an education perspective. We have 2 ministers for education, a minister focused on first and second level, and then a third and fourth focusing on higher education. That's really about making sure that we have the right skills at a baseline. We're investing in R&D significantly to improve the postdoc and the PhD and the research environment. And I think if you look at our third level institutes across the country, they're all now taking on sustainability programs. They are looking at it across the different sectors. So how do we do sustainable materials? How do we do sustainable technology? How do we do sustainable services? So there are that skill building programs right underway at the moment. We can see that there's very popular take up from students. We're continually building new programs. So adding in kind of, we have to refresh that and say, okay, we need more of these skills. But absolutely, technology and skills is at the core of the decision making about investing in Ireland. Can I build my future business in Ireland with you? And it's very much a partnership. So I suppose one of the key strategic things that we do really well nationally is that we are flexible and adaptable. If an industry needs new types of skills, we'll work with the third level and fourth level and with SFI to say, these are new skills coming down the track. How do we build up this competency? So that's very much at the core of what we do as a country. It's competitive. Other countries mirror us, copy us, try and do what we do. So we have to keep refreshing it and keep taking on the new challenges.
Was it a concern, George, that came up much in the research, that idea of, when we're talking about digital and, climate and sustainability, were people worried about the talent side of things and even getting their own teams to upskill, etc.?
It is a recurring theme in the research. It is one of those challenges for most of the larger companies and indeed the smaller companies around, having the right skills in-house in terms of general IT, but also digital insights into sustainability and achieving their goals. But what they're worried about is keeping the staff they've got, because they see other organizations and businesses perhaps more innovative, more forward-looking than their own. And so I think the challenge for there were a couple of HR directors in our survey as well, is that in order to hold on to the talent you've got, never mind recruit, and I know recruiting is also a big priority, you've got to actually have a convincing story to tell, but also demonstrable proof that your business and organization is really embracing the sustainability agenda and has the plan to deliver on your goals. And I think that talent war has taken on a sustainability element to it that Ian has alluded to, but we all see it now every day.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's something we've found ourselves in our research is exactly that. Just coming back to yourself, Orla,
I'd actually just add a little bit to that. We did a piece of research this year, which is the next phase of the Just Transition Strategy, was launched in November last year, and we followed up with a report just last month. And actually it was focused on workers within SSE who had already made that transition from high carbon careers to low carbon careers. And there's a really good opportunity there to think about the skill sets and the depth of knowledge and the transferable skills. So rather than, it's focusing on your whole workforce and thinking about how do we upskill and bring everyone on the sustainability journey. And one of the things that really struck me from that report was just around purpose. We found that the people who had made that transition were now in the jobs that they wanted, were really, really driven and really, really valued the work that they were doing. And that adds to kind of the stickiness of your employees as well. So they want to stay there. They're happy with what they're doing day after day. And it's just, something that really struck us when we were going through the responses.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to get that industry view, because we'll be talking about skills and upskilling later. So it's really interesting. Tell me.
You just find it, I think, when you're recruiting now, people want to feel they're making a difference. Yeah. In a way that wasn't the way 10 years ago, even, especially, I'm in my roles nearly 20 years. And it's just such a change of attitude, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah.
So, I think it's very much, we're all considering the challenges ahead of us, and the challenge is, how do I do this, and who can help me do it? So at the core of IDA strategy at the moment, and this is really coming from industry in terms of how do we solve those challenges, is the transformation pillar. So we have 5 pillars in our strategy, but one of those pillars is transformation. So working with companies on R&D is a key aspect of that. But the second piece of transformation is about training and upskilling. So we are seeing huge demand from our clients to design training programs, work with training programs, and model the next training program so that there is this continuous effort, that it's not, we train them this year so we don't need to train them until the next big challenge comes, that it's a regular iterative process, that we're continually being more creative and more innovative about how we build our teams and staff.
Very good, very good. Orla, the one thing I was going to ask you was about, we were talking with Jared about businesses and how they improve and how they cut their energy output, etc. To what extent is SSE working with clients on that, and what sort of things are you helping them with, and what are they looking for, and are they ambitious?
Yeah, well, I suppose looking at kind of small to medium enterprises in Ireland, one of the easiest things to do is looking at, is my energy 100% renewable? And that's one of the simplest switches that people can make. It's a great first step to think about. After that, there are things around energy audits that could be done. So when you're looking at the actual buildings that you're in, there are things around lighting really that, for example, that you can, see a huge difference when you change to the correct lighting. And then also when you're thinking about things like solar panels. So a few years ago, of course, they probably weren't as prevalent in Ireland, but we're seeing much more and more microgeneration now. And people are really kind of taking on board the opportunity to do that and merging it then when you're looking at the smart appliances. So then you're able to monitor how much energy is being used on different devices, how much energy is being used in lighting, and then bringing it together and having much more control on your energy use. And then if you add in a piece of microgeneration on top of that, you've really got a great opportunity there to kind of get a real feel for how energy is being used by that business. So I think really first step and most simple step is often where's my energy, who's my supplier? So that's usually where we start.
Fair enough. We're actually nearly out of time. Tina, did you want to come in there? No. Oh, sorry, I thought I saw you putting your hand up. Apologies. I'm just going to wrap by just asking you, because it's always nice to be optimistic, just by asking you all, do you feel positive about what's going to happen in Ireland between here and 2030 or between here and 2050? Jared?
I feel positive about it. I feel we still need to have a clearer sense of the role digital technology is going to play in different organizations in achieving our goals. I think we default to it's all to do with the energy or it's all to do with agri, and there are lots of things that could be done there. But in fact, just regular service businesses like my own or industry will all have to play their part as well. And I think we need to be more aware of the menu of tools and options that are out there, not just in Ireland, but internationally, of course. And if we can get the right mix, then I am confident we can achieve our ambitions.
Ian?
I'm hugely ambitious and optimistic. And I think that goes to, I suppose, there is the medium and long-term ambition that we're all comfortable with. The short-term ambition is how do we make that first step? So we're very focused with companies on building a climate action plan. It's very much what Orla said, what's our first step? It's actually very straightforward. As Orla said, how much carbon do we pay for right now? We pay for X. And then we start a plan about how you use digital to reduce your emissions by maybe 20% in the first instance and then change. But when I think about the types of industries that we're building now, the electric vehicle environment, fuel cells, hydrogen, all of these things come into play about a very exciting new industry. If I think back, if we're in 2030 and we look back, it's going to be a bunch of challenges, but we will overcome them and we will have a completely new environment by the time we get there.
Tina?
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Ina said. There's huge ambition there. It's really exciting to be at the first cutting edge of the next offshore industry here in Ireland. 5 gigawatts is hugely ambitious, but I think, we can do this. I think there's a lot of work to do. It'll be might be frustrations along the way over the next 10 years or so, but I think we can make this happen if we all work together. The policy is there, the will is there, and the people are there to do it.
Yeah. Thanks. Orla?
I mean, I can only agree with everything that's been said, to be honest. Absolutely. Ambition, it's so exciting. And for me personally, it's fun. The work that we're doing is really, really brilliant. You know, like again, as I mentioned, nature and the puffins, this is part of my day-to-day life now. It's great. So when you're thinking about how to solve the bigger problems, you know, it's just wonderful to be part of it as well. So.
Okay, wonderful. Well, look, on that note, can I say a huge thank you to you all. Thanks a million, Gerard,
Sure.
Ian, Tina, and Orla. If you'd like to give them a round of applause. And now it's already time to introduce our next keynote of the morning. So we're moving to chapter 2, which is female leadership. And who better to talk to this than the former Taoiseach, that's Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister, for those who don't know, and now MEP since 2019, Frances Fitzgerald.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you for this Huawei European Innovation Day event held in collaboration with Dublin Chamber. I'm delighted to join you this morning to share some of my thoughts on female leadership, our unfinished economies and our unfinished democracies, and the potential that the green and digital transformation have for women in the economy. I've been working on gender equality for quite a while now, and the landscape of gender equality is always developing, always changing. I recently read an interesting article from the World Economic Forum claiming that diversity, equity, and inclusion have failed political systems in society, and we should reconsider refocusing our efforts on belonging, dignity, and justice instead. Now, the argument is that existing DEI initiatives only expose discriminatory attitudes, but they don't do enough to mitigate their effects on those who suffer from them. Belonging, dignity, and justice are alternative values that center the voices and experiences of marginalized people. We probably need both, actually. But over the past 3 decades, corporations, nonprofits, organizations of all sorts, universities, foundations, have relied on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're still very important in creating a workforce and a workplace that is diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, and gender. On its face, DEI attempts to address the most pressing, long-standing issues in a workplace. And it was thought by institutionalizing procedures that promote inclusion and equity, they could ensure fairness and equal opportunity and avoid discrimination in the workplace. But let's ask the question, have these measures, have they really worked? I think the answer to that is that we still have quite a journey ahead. And some of the discrimination that remains is really quite unacceptable. In this increasingly globalized world and interconnected world, we cannot conclusively know if we are progressing on gender equality without looking at other issues and applying what I call a gender lens. We have to apply a gender lens at each issue. That is from a gender equality perspective. Once you start doing this, you begin to see the big gaps that we have. I'm going to take 3 issues and apply the gender lens, the economy and the digital and green transitions. First, I want to mention the economy. For years, I've talked about unfinished democracies in terms of representation and the lack of a critical mass of women in decision-making. But over recent times, I'm looking more at unfinished economies. And despite the fact that we know conclusively now that gender equality makes really good economic sense, and there's very good arguments there, we are still far from having an economy that works and is fully inclusive of women. According to the IMF, if women's employment equaled men's, economies would become more resilient and economic growth would be higher. Estimates show that closing the gender gap in employment could increase GDP by an average of 35%, of which 7 to 8 percent points are productivity gains due to gender diversity. And here's an interesting point. Adding one more woman in a firm's senior management team or corporate board, while keeping the size of the board unchanged, is associated with an 8 to 13 basis point higher return on assets. These figures are well documented by the IMF in some of their publications. Yet we have still been resistant to facilitating those gains. For example, take childcare. Right throughout the pandemic, we really haven't seen childcare as essential as it should be. Working from home is no substitute for childcare, as we know, but childcare services were not deemed to be essential. We really need to facilitate work-life balance for women and men, and facilitating women's work really means that we have to look at these issues around childcare. We have a choice to make whether we want to do this or not. It's a question of priorities. We can embrace more flexibility, even now post-COVID. There's a lot of choices on the table that we need to look at and think very carefully about. We also need to talk about care more frequently. The care sector as a whole needs a serious rethink. That's a global reality for women in every country. The EU knows that. We have to look at how the care economy can be developed, how there could be 8 million jobs across Europe, and how dealing with the care issues would really increase the value of the work that women do. And women do a lot of the caring, both formal and informal, in our societies. As I say, potential for 8 million jobs across Europe. It's very relevant to growing the economic sector, but also dealing with the value that we put on women's work and the potential for women and men to combine work life. This is becoming increasingly important across Europe as we have an aging population. So we've got to invest in care. And I think it's really important that President Ursula von der Leyen, and I've been encouraging this, announced the establishment of a European care strategy in her recent State of the Union address. I've been working towards that goal, and I really look forward to what the Commission will do with that strategy. It's a real opportunity for us across Europe to begin to take care more seriously. It's also necessary, of course, for the green economy, for the future of the green economy, because we have to upskill and retrain many workers so that Europe can take advantage of the various job opportunities. The European Skills Agenda, the Pact for Skills, the ESF+, the Youth Employment Initiative, and the Just Transition Fund are powerful mechanisms for this. So there's great opportunity up there, but if we want to keep innovation in Europe, we have to get on with that retraining, reskilling, and care is an important part of that. By ensuring that the green and digital economy take account of the unique circumstances of women, we have the potential to create thousands of jobs, give a substantial boost to our economies, and to build a society that is better suited to women's daily reality and increasingly men's daily realities as new fathers want to be part of their children's lives. However, to do so, women must be involved in building the transition, and they can play a huge role. But the European Commission 2019 Women in Digital Scoreboard noted that only 17% of EU ICT specialists are women. Very low, a long journey ahead. We've got to get more women into the sphere. We've got to have more young women taking up STEM subjects, and we have to promote the huge opportunities are there. If we don't, it's a completely missed opportunity. Of course, we have to look at entrepreneurship, business, enterprise, SMEs. They're all critical to the green and digital transformation. Female entrepreneurship is a significant factor in today's economy, particularly through SMEs, but has the potential to expand further. Currently, women constitute 34.4% of the EU self-employed and 30% of startup entrepreneurs. But with mentorship and support, we're seeing huge increases in the potential of women's entrepreneurship. And by supporting women's entrepreneurship, we can really make a difference to our economies. And I think the most advanced firms and countries are recognizing this increasingly. STEM is very important, as I've said. We've got to see more girls taking up maths and science subjects in schools. The use of Erasmus, of course, is really important as well, and the opportunity to be part of Erasmus, and more money has gone into that from the EU this year as well. The EU fund this, as well as the European Investment Bank, in terms of access to microfinance. They're doing a great job in relation to this, and we have to raise awareness of these EU funding possibilities. And we have to increase awareness of the EU programs and all of the opportunities that are there to give women an opportunity to boost their skills and access to capital and financial support. It's often more difficult for women to access the finance. So we have to build a greener future. that is inclusive for women. Take transportation. As we build a transportation system that is climate friendly, women's particular and unique needs need to be in there in how they develop. Promoting sustainable and equitable mobility solutions for all and diverse transport choices, including public transport, can contribute to the green digital economy and the transition. So we have to promote and further increase women's participation in mobility-related consultation. That's very important in planning and decision-making, and encourage companies to tackle the underrepresentation of women in this particular area with a great focus on innovation and digitalization in transport, ensuring that shift towards a sustainable and greener economy and greener mobility. There's lots of courses being run in Dublin in relation to that. In terms of female leadership, let me conclude again by saying we have unfinished democracies. We really do need to work on that. We've got to get a critical mass of women into Parliament right across Europe. We need to be at the 50% mark. It makes such a difference when you have a critical mass of women and men working together, you get better solutions. My own experience has taught me that. I've been in a cabinet with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 women out of 15. And once you begin to get greater numbers, you get a different dynamic, you get a different decision making, you get a more inclusive decision making, and we have to work towards that. And companies have a role to play as well in making sure that their management boards and senior management, reflect the population. Equal pay is very important. We still have a pension gap. We've got to work on that. And I think we've again got to look not just at equal pay, but job equity. I recently spoke with the CEO of one of the Icelandic banks, and she said to me, look, tell me how much women are earning in your organization, tell me how much men are earning, and then start doing away with those differences and really examining what they are until you get equal pay at all levels. So let's work together to ensure that these ongoing challenges in relation to equality are dealt with. Thanks again for inviting me to join with you today, and I hope I have provided you with a few thoughts on how we can advance gender equality for the betterment of our societies and economies. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much to Frances Fitzgerald for setting the tone for this part of the morning. And now to continue a little bit on that theme, let me introduce one of the deserving awardees of the new Huawei Tech for Her scholarships, Christina Varga.
Hello everyone, my name is Christina Varga and I am a second-year undergraduate student studying computer science in TU Dublin. I just wanted to thank Huawei for giving me this amazing opportunity and for aiding me in my studies with their wonderful scholarship program, Tech for Her. This scholarship program is very beneficial because not only does it help young women such as myself complete our studies, but it also addresses a very real issue affecting STEM-related fields, where only 25% of the total workforce are women. This gender gap can be caused by several factors, but in my personal experience, one of the main contributors to this problem is a lack of support. Women are often discouraged from pursuing studies in the STEM-related fields due to either gender stereotyping or a lack of funds. When I was making the important decision as to what I should be studying and what career to pursue, I experienced this firsthand because I was questioning whether I would be able to fit in a male-dominated workplace. The stereotype that pursuing a career within STEM fields is a masculine thing to do might deter a lot of young women from choosing STEM fields as a career goal, but this can be tackled if there are more women working in these fields. The efforts made to aid women who are studying STEM fields have had a positive impact on this gender gap. I cannot express how grateful I am that there are options like the Tech for Her program out there willing to support women in their studies. Being one of the awardees of the Tech for Her Scholarship 2020-2021 has been an amazing experience because of the incredible support I've received. The faith that Huawei placed in me by choosing me as one of the awardees and providing me with the financial support that I needed has been an incredible boost of morale. The scholarship program also provided me with the opportunity to speak with highly skilled professionals through their masterclasses, and which gave me the opportunity to gain insight as to how these women achieve success within their fields and the type of skills that I would need to succeed. Thank you very much for listening. See.
What a great initiative and what an impressive young woman indeed. On that note, I'm delighted to introduce our next crop of panellists. So please welcome to the stage the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Alison Gilliland, Siobhan O'Shea of CPL, also Vice President of Dublin Chamber, Breed Horan, Chancellor of DCU, among many other things, and Paul Harrison, UK Director of Communications with Huawei Technologies. Thanks a million for all being with us today. So we're hoping now to explore the importance of female leadership in business, what organisations should be doing to promote this, and your own experiences, whether it's in politics or in industry. So I may start with yourself, Lord Mayor, if I might. How do we ensure that young women have access to the lucrative roles in industry that we've been discussing today? You know, that whole journey from school to leadership, I suppose I'm talking. Your own background as a teacher in a DESH school, if I'm right?
Yeah, I trained as a teacher, and I've worked, I suppose, in Spain and here in Dublin in both the DESH school and Educate Together. And I think that pathway towards leadership starts really, really young. It actually starts in the home, where parents would be conscious of not playing into the typical gender stereotypes and giving the soft pink toys to the girls and the more the construction Lego type toys to the boys. And I think that you would see that in preschool and in primary school, a real consciousness, even when it comes to stories and activities, that you do balance the protagonists in stories, whether that to have female leads, so that young girls early on have a built-in messaging system from the adults in their lives that girls can be whatever they want. They can be leaders, they can be involved in tech, they can be in politics, and that there is a balance there with their male counterparts. So starting really young, our career guidance teachers also have a huge role in that, particularly when it comes to advising on career, that they are not falling into that trap of gender bias and sort of pushing girls or suggesting girls go into the more caring industries and guys go into the more tech, that it's very much open and balanced.
Yeah, and we were talking about, in fact, the winners of the BT Young Scientists, the most recent winners, and then they went on to win the European competition. That was exactly their study. They were looking at that.
It's fair, and I think it takes for teachers to be conscious of the need to gender disrupt those stereotypes and go out of their way and be very conscious of their language, their behaviour, that when they're choosing a leader for a group of children to work on a project, that, you know, girls are to the fore of their mind, almost positively discriminate in favour of girls to break that, because that way also the boys are getting the message that they're equal, women are equal, and particularly when it comes to employment and balancing work and life, and particularly home life, that boys grow up seeing their dads cook, clean, do those caring roles. And again, it's that messaging and that subtle messaging, because children aren't born with those gender stereotypes to fall into them, because homeschool society is so biased. And it really is. I can't emphasize enough the need to be so conscious as adults interacting with young people.
Yeah, and it's something that's come through with a lot of research we've done over the years as well, is exactly that strong female role models are very important for young boys as well. It's, you know, people have this idea it's only for young women, but it's very important for young men as well. Before I move on, I have to ask you as well, I mean, you look at countries like, you'll be well aware of this, but countries like Iceland, where you're talking 50-50, 51% I think now of women in, in Congress or in Parliament. What's happening in Ireland, and what can we do to change it?
Yeah, we are, I think it's 101st when it comes to female representation at national parliaments. And even my own experience, I'm the 353rd Lord Mayor, but only the 10th female Lord Mayor. So we've a lot of catching up to do. A colleague of mine, Ivana Bacik, did some research about a decade ago, and she called the inhibitors the 5 C's. So you've care, which is both childcare and elder care, competence, cash, culture, and candidate selection. And I think the one that's probably most difficult to change is culture. And you see it in our parliament, and I no doubt in our own council, that there is a focus on the male politician. And the style of the male politician can be very different from the female. And a lot of the time, if that is your role model and you're female and you're going, I can't act like that, that's not my way of doing things. And I remember in the very beginning of my own political life, I found that really difficult. And I just decided, no, I just need to be me and do it my way, do it the female way. And that is, we do a lot of collaboration. We have a great Dublin City Council Women's Committee, and one of our most recent projects was to, I suppose, demystify the role of a public representative. So we created a series of little mini videos, just under a minute, with our 23 female councillors, just talking about the role, what they like about it, what they find difficult about it, and just putting it out there in the hope that we would inspire other women, young women, women from different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnic and racial backgrounds, to come and join us, because it's a very fulfilling role. And I think when you get a critical mass of women in politics, we can change the priorities that are given nationally. And that's what we need to do to, I suppose, really achieve political balance, but also societal balance, because after all, politicians are legislators. You know, and we can legislate more in the area of gender.
Absolutely, and it's funny when you look at the countries that do have, you know, a predominance of women in politics, you find that they do in industry as well.
Yeah, you know.
Exactly. So it is fascinating. Speaking of which, I suppose, Siobhan O'Shea, in your role at CPL, the major recruitment company, tell me a little bit about, you know, we haven't mentioned it at all this morning yet, but the pandemic and the effect that has had on women in work, and therefore women in leadership in work and in business.
Yeah, so look, I think, Anne, it's will be no surprise to most of our audience to hear that the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women, and that's had a knock-on impact to women in the workplace. And we're seeing it, I suppose, because of the fact that, you know, a lot of the sectors that were most impacted by COVID-19 were industries and sectors that are primarily employing females. So even if you look at sectors like retail, tourism, hospitality, and what's happening as a consequence of that is that you're seeing women probably evaluating their futures and considering their next chapters and whether they're going to stay in those industries or potentially reskill and upskill and move into new sectors. So that's one of the changes that we've seen kind of unfold as a result of this, you know, this last 20 months. Then secondly, we're seeing that global trends that are impacting, I suppose, and that we're seeing trickling down from a domestic basis are things like that the majority of jobs that have been lost permanently to the pandemic are women's jobs as well. So, you know, you're seeing that having a knock-on impact to the overall female participation rate. So I think there's a huge onus on governments and companies to look at, I suppose, creating pathways to success for women who have been kind of maybe driven out of the labour market as a consequence of what we've experienced in these 2 years. And then I suppose other trends that we're seeing are around, you know, burnout and people really struggling, I suppose, to manage all of the extra responsibilities that they've had to contend with through lockdowns and through the rapid transformation, I suppose, of the future of work and the fact they may be remote working and juggling caring responsibilities as well. And we know that women do 3 times as much caring responsibilities as men do. And again, that's had a knock-on impact into the labour market. And we're seeing it on the front line in CPL, you know, in terms of with a lot of the customers we work with, they're really committed to trying to create gender balance within their organisations. They're struggling maybe at times to get the talent in now. And that's very specific within a number of key sectors where traditionally they're high male representation anyway, so like technology or fintech or pharma and financial services, etc. So there's been a huge kind of setback, I would say, to gender progress, and that's something that we all have kind of a responsibility to kind of step up to coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I've seen it, I must say, in the tech sector. you know, that a lot of very senior women that I'm talking to, they always seem to be the ones where the children are in the background or sitting around or they have to run. It never seems to be the blokes, you know, despite the fact that we think we've become so much more equal, it just doesn't seem to have quite happened, has it?
Yeah, and actually, Anne, it's funny because we did some research through our Future of Work Institute in CPL, which is our consultancy arm of our business. And that is exactly what emerged in terms of some of the trends. We spoke to a huge number of female executives across multiple industry sectors and roles. And that was one of the key themes that kind of emerged, that imbalance in the home and the knock-on impact that was having onto people's careers.
Yeah, and I think it's hugely relevant to this discussion because I'm going to talk to Breathe about it now, but you know, that journey again through, I mean, you're not going to get women on boards or women in leadership positions unless they're coming up through, you know, lower management and then middle management and higher management. Breathe, tell me a little bit, I mean, and you might just explain as well to our viewers, as well as your own role as Chancellor at DCU, you're very involved with a couple of major initiatives like the 30% Club and Better Business, Better Balance?
Balance for Better Business.
Balance for Better Business.
Before I do, just touching on the pandemic, and I agree absolutely with what's been said in terms of how it's impacted on women in the workforce, but I think it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge that actually our health service is significantly majority female, and they've been our front line, literally. And the other profession that is significantly majority female is actually the teaching profession, particularly at primary and secondary level, and of course in preschool. I just think it would be remiss not to recognise the pressures they've been under. And maybe that's influenced by the fact that one of my sons is married to a community nurse. And certainly, while she was still at work, she's currently on maternity leave, but while she was still at work, he was working from home. And there was an interesting experience for him in that his experience of fatherhood was completely different to previous generations. Now, my own husband actually worked part-time, so he was the primary carer. But for Joe, my son, he was at home juggling the baby and the calls and the meetings. And for him, that was a hugely positive experience. And you know, he's delighted that his company has said it will be hybrid working in the future and that he will be able to combine that parenting role. So I think, I hope we won't lose the positive experience that some men have had of actually experiencing the privilege of the full aspect of parenting. Whether it's actually looking after a small child as he was doing in the home or doing the drop-off at school. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. And I do believe that there's a really important development in terms of more paternity leave, more parental leave, and the culture in organisations where it's okay for guys to take and avail of those. So I think we'd be remiss in terms of the technology sector, but right across industry and employment if we didn't actually acknowledge that.
No, and I think it's important to recognise there are positives that have come out of this as well. That's definitely one of them.
Yeah, and we really shouldn't lose them. That's my point. Yeah. Because it was mentioned on the previous panel, the importance of culture. So that's very much what I've been about in terms of the gender aspects of what I've been looking at in the last number of years, is that, you know, we talk about diversity as a general kind of issue. When I talk about gender, I tend to talk about balance rather than diversity, because we're 50% of the population. And as a teenager, which is kind of a half a century ago in my case, I was struck by the unfairness of how women were treated. As I've gone through my life, I'm struck more and more by the waste of how we treat women. And, you know, Francis Fitzgerald talked about this unfinished democracy, but it's also an unfinished development of our talent. So I see that coming right through, as Alison said, from family, from books, and I brought a visual aid given the time of year. As I was having my breakfast this morning, I was thinking about talking about books and, you know, the predominance of the male kind of hero in books. And even when the character is a bear, research shows that they're much more likely to have a male name than a female name. And this is Harry. Happily, in this particular book, which is why I actually have it for my granddaughter, Harry has to be rescued. Whereas in a lot of books for children, it's Harriet has to be rescued by Harry. In this case, Harry has to be rescued. But it's really important that we all think like that. So for me, in the last number of years, I've been working at the leadership end, if you like, but it does start. But we can't wait for the next generation to actually, solve this problem. So I think we need to come at it from all ends. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what we do in DCU. But first of all, to go back to your question, I sound like a politician. I'm just completely, sorry, Alison.
Good thing is
No disrespect. I've just skirted around, but going back to your question. In 2015, we launched the 30% Club in Ireland. And that is a club of business organisations, of CEOs and chairs of companies. And the objective was to draw attention to the lack of the female voice and representation in leadership, both on boards and in executive leadership. And at that stage, my conviction is around the loss of talent as you go up through organizations, the loss of different perspectives. And I've seen it in operation where you have a diverse group looking at any issue, whether it's considering strategy or, for example, in crisis and risk management. I've seen it really in action. Having diverse voices and diverse perspectives really does add. And the bottom line, of course, is that research shows that gender-balanced leadership in a company contributes to the bottom line. So that's the key message. So through the 30% Club, we started to engage with business leaders, and now they have almost 300 leading businesses associated with the 30% Club. And it was focused on that executive and board membership. When we started in 2015, there were 11% of the boards of the leading Irish companies. It's kind of a benchmark that's used internationally. 11% of those boards were female. By 2018, that was 18%. And the government agreed to a proposal that we put forward in, actually it was a strategy that was launched by Frances Fitzgerald when she was the relevant minister, Strategy for Women and Girls. And we suggested that we needed to get more impetus. So the 30% Club is very much about engagement, about supporting business as they work towards these objectives. But we said we would like to have a mandate, an organisation that was mandated to set targets for business. So the government established Balance for Better Business. It has government support, it's business-led. And Gary Kennedy and I became co-chairs in 2018. At that point, as I say, the percentage was 18%. Happily, we finished our term earlier this year, and we were able to report that it had gone over 30%. Now, 30% is a very significant number because it's then when you have 30% of any supposed minority in a room, they begin to be heard as individuals. So when Breed says something, if I'm the only woman in the room, as I was on many occasions through my career, that's kind of women's view. But, if we're there with 10 other men, then if I say something, well, that's Breed. Siobhan says something, it's Siobhan's. There's a proper balance in the discussion. So Balance for Better Business, the name was chosen very carefully. And Balance for Better Business has set targets for boards of listed companies, for private companies, and also for the executive teams in listed companies, in private companies, and in multinationals, because we do need to be seeing change in all of those areas. But that is at one end, and it is very important. And the 30% Club continues to work really actively with business to support them. And actually, very recently, they've launched a working group for the technology sector, having had working groups in other sectors for a number of years. So there's a lot of good work going on.
And I will come back to you because I want to ask you further, but I do want to bring Paul in. Paul, I'm not going to make the silly jokes about you being outnumbered here and all the rest of it. Quite seriously, it really is important that when we're talking about diversity, we're not talking about all women or all men or anything ridiculous like that. What we're talking about is that diversity of thought that comes with having different people on the board or in the room. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your role in Huawei and also your role for many years in journalism as an editor in the UK and just your own experience of this issue. And then I also do want you to tell me what sort of initiatives is Huawei doing to make sure that we kind of tackle this.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate enough to have a perspective from two very different industries. I work now at Huawei in London, but the majority of my working life was actually in the media working at Sky News. I think diversity is something that's being tackled very hard in the media at the moment. Gender balance has been in a better place, I would find, over recent years in the media. You've got a situation at the moment, for example, where the editor-in-chief of BBC News, of ITV News, Channel 4, Channel 5, and the CEO of ITV, and also senior leaders within Sky, they are all women. That is, a place that I would imagine the media is very pleased, to be in. The media has got a lot of things wrong over the years, and part of that probably is because they haven't had women in leadership positions. So that's in a good place. But I've jumped across now, of course, to PR and comms. And I suppose in the area where I work, actually, reassuringly, that balance is good. Every day I work with different parts of Europe, different parts of the world, and the gender balance is actually pretty good in my area. But I work in the ICT industry. So there are parts of Huawei where we've recognized that we need to do a lot more to try and redress that balance. There is a huge gender deficit across the whole of the ICT industry. So we're not alone. Huawei is not alone in battling those challenges. The good thing is that we've identified them and we're doing a lot about it. But my ultimate boss, right up to the board level, is a woman, Catherine Chen. She, I know very well, has this issue very close to her heart and is doing a lot and driving a lot within the company to make these changes, but it's slow. And when you've got a very narrow or small female talent pool out there, you get to realize what actually really needs to happen, and we've touched on this already, in education from a young age is where we have to target. So I think the bottom line is so much more to do on all this, and we've started tackling it in our own way, but of course the whole industry needs to do the same.
And just what kind of initiatives are going on in Huawei, for example?
Well, we touched on one of them just in the video before, Tech for Her, which is obviously an initiative and a program that's happening here, in Ireland, and it's going very well. 11 apprenticeships and support financially, but also access to senior leaders within the business. That's working very well, and you could tell that. But the company as a whole has been focused on this for a number of years. If you go back to one of our flagship programs, the Seeds for the Future program, that began back in 2008. So already we were thinking, the future is coming at us very quickly. A lot is changing, and we need to make sure that we've got the right skills in the ICT industry. So Seeds for the Future, the ICT Academy, which is run by Pallavi Malhotra, a fantastic leader in Huawei. She has a great story. I can't go into it in too much detail at the moment, not enough time, but suffice to say she was one of the very earliest female engineers in the telecoms world. She worked in that for about 18 years or so, and then became a lecturer after that, and we brought her on board with one of the key focuses was to develop a program, an ICT Academy program that would allow academic institutions right across Europe a focal point to push them in the right direction, to make sure that we're targeting not just young women, young men as well, because let's face it, what is happening right now is a huge transformation in the digital space, in the technology world, and there are just simply not enough people being trained in those areas. It all sounds great what the future may look like, but we also can't have 70% of those thoughts and those decisions being made now by men and 30% by women, because the decisions that are being made now are actually forming the future right this minute. So it's pretty urgent, and we need to redress that balance quickly.
I couldn't agree more. We don't have a huge amount of time. My gosh, it goes by so fast. But Breathe, I do want to come back, because Paul mentioned it there as well, that whole idea. We mentioned already, parents, teachers, career advisors, etc. Tell me a little bit about, you're involved in an initiative about teachers and industry, am I right?
Absolutely. In DCU, and I'm really proud to be associated with DCU for a whole range of reasons, but one in particular is around an absolute part of the DNA of DCU is collaboration with other organisations and particularly with enterprise. So we have a number of initiatives that are really valuable, I think, in this space. And one, happily, we secured almost 20 million in funding under the Human Capital Initiative to actually look at the curriculum right across for undergraduates to make sure, to your point, Paul, that actually STEM and digital skills are built in, integrated in a really effective way. Because, to be honest, there's no career in the future that's not going to have a STEM and digital aspect to it, and I think that needs to come through much more strongly. So that DCU Futures initiative is really important. At the other end, obviously, we train a huge amount of teachers because we've incorporated St. Patrick's College for the last 5 years. So we have a real presence as the Institute of Education. And we have a number of initiatives through that and through our science and technology wing as well. But one in particular that you might be interested in is the STEM internship for trainee teachers. And that came about, again, through collaboration between the 30% Club and DCU, initially with Accenture, but actually it has built over the last 5 years and is expanding. We'd really like to see it going onto a national platform, but happily UCD and Maynooth University are also involved. And I think it's over 30 employers take in trainee teachers during the summer, give them an internship in a technology type area, and that gives them experience of the potential careers that are there. Because, you know, teachers typically, not all of them, but typically they go to school, they go to college, and they become teachers. So they need to actually understand the world of the future. And, you know, there are technology roles, and some of the companies involved, by the way, it started with technology companies, but several of them now are financial services and so on, because every company has a technology aspect to it. So that program is really interesting. And then in terms of gender balance, we have a couple of really, I think, kind of fun initiatives in that we have a Lego lab, for example, and there's great initiatives that go on a continuing basis with the Irish Girl Guides. So focusing on girls, introducing them to the concepts of just mechanical engineering in terms of Lego, as Alison mentioned already, but also robotics and you know, computing ideas. And also we have a Minecraft lab. Can't claim to be an expert in Minecraft, but that's a really innovative approach as well, because again, it's in collaboration with others, and there's really interesting research going on with schools as to how Minecraft could become more of a learning tool and actually integrate it into schools, because we do need to support future teachers, develop them better, but also support existing teachers. So I think there's a great role for higher education and further education to work with enterprise. And I think that's something that I'm very excited about.
I'd be remiss to, I'm moving to slightly more negative territory here from such a lovely positive point from you, Breathe, but we'd be remiss in not talking about the gender pay gap, and I want to talk to Siobhan and Alison about that. Siobhan, you might give us a little bit of context. Where are we at with the gender pay gap?
Yeah, so, well, unfortunately, the pandemic has had an impact on the gender pay gap, and it's currently in Europe, according to the European Commission, it's stagnant at around 14.1%, and that hasn't changed in nearly over a decade. And then in Ireland, the last reported data was that it's at 14.4%. Again, I think, you know, there's huge will and desire and ambition to make a change on this. And I think with the enactment of the new gender pay gap bill that's coming through at the minute, you know, companies over 250 employees will have to report. And a lot of companies in Ireland have already come out and reported in advance of you know, the legislation. Companies, organisations like An Post and Bank of Ireland and PwC and many others. So I think there's a great appetite to change it and to improve it, but there's a lot of systemic problems that are still contributing, and I suppose it's trying to create a better pipeline of female talent into management and leadership roles. You know, this knock-on impact of the caring has fed into this gender gap situation, unfortunately. So again, it's providing, and the Dublin Chamber do a huge amount of lobbying to government on this around providing better societal supports for childcare. That kind of align up to maybe what we see in the Nordic countries or other countries that are really pioneering on this. So I think a lot of work to do, but a great will and appetite to make it happen.
Yeah, good to hear. And Alison, the legislation, is that the way to go? Is it going to make all the difference?
Yeah, it's one part of it, in all honesty. And I just want to pick up on what Siobhan said there about care. And we can see how we are so far behind when it comes to universal, public, affordable childcare. And that's for both parents. It's like a second mortgage here. And also elder care. And I think when you look at the number of females in employment and you follow their trajectory, there comes a period where it's generally when their children are born that they're forced a lot of the time to reduce their working hours or give up work altogether, because the choice between what they're being paid and what they're paying out in childcare, plus the guilt that they feel as well, and the inflexibility a lot of the time with employers that they need a day off because their child is sick and they can't go into childcare, or they want to celebrate those little milestones such as sports day when they're in junior infants. That flexibility has to be there. So I do think while the legislation is very welcome, it is only one aspect of it, and the wider societal supports that we as a state need to put in place are really, really crucial. And I just want to diverge one moment and pick up on Breed's Girl Guides and STEM. My niece actually went to that. And the change in her language when she came home, and she was seeing science and robotics in action. And I could hear her talking to her two cousins. And now science is their favorite. The three girls, it's their favorite subject. So little experiences like that can have a massive knock-on ripple effect.
You've just,
well done.
You've just made my day, Alison, and I will bring that back to my colleagues in DCU. But interestingly, IWISH, which is an initiative led out of Cork, but nationally now, to encourage girls to go into STEM courses, they published research, I think with Accenture, but perhaps on their own, where they showed that if girls took part in external to school, if they went to at least 2 kind of events that exposed them to STEM, they were absolutely much more likely to pick a STEM course in college. So it doesn't take a huge amount, but we just need to be doing a lot more of it. And we need it to be on a national scale. We need to support it, and we need to support parents and teachers, because again, research has shown parents are huge influence in the choice of courses. And a lot of parents have had no exposure to the opportunities that are there. And Ian from the IDA spoke about that so ambitiously. I'm totally in that camp. When we saw technology coming in the 70s, our first reaction was fear as a country, as financial services. Everybody was afraid all the jobs would go. I mean, look where we've come by being adaptable, by being agile, by being well educated. Ireland has huge opportunities. We just need to grasp them.
I think that's a lovely, I can't believe we have to end there. I mean, I feel like we've only just started the conversation, but hopefully it'll be thought-provoking for people, and it'll allow them to have a think, a little bit further on some of these really important areas. We're actually now going to go to a coffee break, so I want to say thanks a million to our panel. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Breed. Thank you, Siobhan, and thank you so much, Lord Mayor Alison Gilliland. We're going for a very short break now, but be back with us quickly because we have an incredible last session with really some superb panelists. We'll see you then. welcome back to our final panel of this morning. So we're going to explore the role that education has to play in developing the next generation of talent, our future workforce, if you will, and the supports that need to be in place to deliver education in an equitable manner to ensure that we're not leaving anybody behind. So will you please welcome my guests this morning. So on the stage here beside me is Sarah Jane Delaney, Professor of Inclusive Computer Science at TU Dublin. Conor McGinn, CEO of Acara Robotics, among other things. Dr. Brendan Jennings, Vice President for Research and Innovation at TU Dublin. And Dr. Lisa Higgins, Head of Challenge Research, Education and Public Engagement at Science Foundation Ireland. So you're all most welcome. Again, I'm just going to ask you, for those who don't know you, I'm going to go through the four of you. You're going to introduce yourselves and your organisations, I suppose, particularly in the context of STEM education. So yourself, Sarah Jane.
Okay, so I'm Sarah Jane Delaney, and I'm Professor of Inclusive Computer Science at TU Dublin. And I was thinking back over, I've been in computer science education for over 20 years now. So I've been involved, you know, from the full pipeline. You take the undergraduate, the graduates that we prepare for sort of entry level into IT and computer science positions. And then at the postgrad level where, you know, we're specializing and particularly my area of research is AI and machine learning, so we're producing sort of specialist machine learning graduates at a postgrad level. And then I'm also TU Dublin lead for the CRT, the SFI CRT in machine learning. So we're actually producing industry-ready PhD graduates in machine learning. So, you know, a fair bit of experience across the board there. And in my role as sort of Professor of Inclusive Computer Science, I've also got a focus on the recruitment and the retention of women and female students into computer science. Because computer science is one of the STEM areas where, you know, the representation of girls is really low. And so we do our bit in computer science, and I also do a little bit of research in that area where we're looking at practical techniques for how to encourage the girls that we do get to stay, but also how to recruit them in.
Wonderful, thank you. Conor?
So my name is Conor McGinn. My background in STEM education primarily comes from the time I've spent since 2014 as an assistant professor in the School of Engineering in Trinity College, where I've lectured engineering design, robotics and innovation, among other things. More recently, I helped set up a company called Acara, and among the co-founders that also set the company up with me were, you know, 4 out of the 5 of them came from, they were at one stage my students. So from starting a robotics research group now right the way through to being involved in a spin out or a startup, you know, I guess it's quite a you know, from start to finish on that, I guess, educational journey of coming to a new type of technology, right the way through to, you know, coming across the idea, coming up with prototypes, and now actually trying to bring them from the lab into the real world.
Fantastic. And Brendan?
So I'm Brendan Jennings. I'm Vice President for Research and Innovation at TU Dublin, but I only joined the university 2 months ago, so I'm quite new. I'm trained as an engineer. I did my PhD in telecommunications, and most of my career has been involved as an active researcher, and been lucky enough to work with Huawei on some projects and lots of other multinationals based here in Ireland. So I suppose from the research side, I think there's a huge role for researchers to play in terms of engaging with the public about our work and creating that excitement in young people about the potential to come into careers in the STEM areas. And I suppose at a university level, TU Dublin is a relatively new university, formed just 3 years ago. And we've embarked on a pretty large-scale project to totally rethink how we offer our education to our students, and to, I suppose, move away from traditional modes to acknowledge that, you know, our primary role is no longer to just deliver content. That, you know, content is widely available across the internet, and young people are very au fait with going and engaging and learning things themselves. So we're really thinking, well, our major differentiator and the major reason to come to university is to gain experiences and to So can we really reform our educational model to focus on the kind of experiences students get and the value they get from those? Can we have much more practice-based models for delivering education? And can we have our students as sort of co-creators and are much more influential in terms of defining what they want to learn themselves? So those, I suppose, are the aspects I'm starting to look at.
Thank you. And Lisa?
Hi, Anne. Thanks very much. Yeah, my name is Lisa Higgins. I'm the Head of Challenge Research, Education and Public Engagement at Science Foundation Ireland. So, as you suggested, for those who don't know, Science Foundation Ireland is the largest funder of competitive research in Ireland. We fund into higher education institutions across all areas of STEM, both smaller scale projects right up to our larger research centres. We also have a mandate for education and public engagement. So we look right from through the pipeline in order to raise an interest in STEM at very early stages. We work with many partnerships with primary and post-primary in order to do that effectively. And we also have a very strong focus on raising an awareness with the general public on the benefits and the values of science and what it can bring.
Thanks a million. Coming back to yourself, Sarah Jane, like it's come up a lot earlier in the morning, but obviously talent is crucial to the organisations of the future. And we could probably never have enough people doing ICT or data science or machine learning or you name it. How important is the whole upskilling side? And I know it's something you're very focused on.
Yeah, I think that it's really important. I think that there's a certain number of people of students who come out of second level and head in that direction. But there's this huge pool of people who will be well able to do it and don't necessarily understand what roles in IT are. So the upskilling part, there's two aspects to it. The first is to take the people who have the software development skills and that and then upskill them into the areas where we have the deficiencies in skills. I know AI and machine learning is one of those big ones at the moment. But secondly, there's the opportunity for conversion. And, I think there's plenty of opportunities and there's lots out there at the moment which are funded also by the government through the HEA Springboard programme and now through the whole micro-credentials sort of, it's a new term that has come out, but I think those types of programmes have existed, but they're being really focused on at the moment, where you take graduates who have, skills in their own discipline and then give them an opportunity to move into IT through short, sharp, focused programmes that might concentrate on parts that they're particularly interested in or have particular skills in. So yeah, I think upskilling is a big opportunity that, and we do it, and I think all universities are at it as well to try to upskill and bring in the students from other disciplines.
And just moving to yourself, Conor, as and I would know you as CEO of Acara. That's how we would have met in the past. But I'm very interested on the pedagogy side as well. You've won awards for the Provost, etc., which you might tell us about. But it's for the style of teaching that you employ, and I really would like you to explain to our viewers a little bit about the idea behind that. And tell us about the award as well. Go on.
So last year I was awarded one of the Provost Teaching Awards in Trinity, which is an award for excellence given to people who show innovation and commitment to teaching. So I was indeed very honoured to be nominated and subsequently awarded with it. I guess one of the kind of key areas that came back as to why I was given the award was that I kind of took a somewhat different approach to some of the classes I was teaching. The classes in particular were focused around the area of design, and the professor that taught it before me was, excellent in that field. But I think the methods were, very similar to how traditional classes are, where you have a lecture and there's a professor at the top of the room, and then there's 30 or 40 people sitting there, waiting on every word they say. Instead, the approach I took was to take a step back and focus it much more on kind of discovery-based learning. So rather than giving them very specific problems to solve, often I gave them very vague problems to solve, and that often is more, reflects more what the real world is, right? Because very often we're dealing with incomplete information, we're dealing with problems that are ill-defined from the start, and incorporating that kind of problem definition part as part of the process, part of the project they'd go through, forced them to actually think about the project very critically from the outside, and they weren't just trying to figure out, well, what does the professor want and how can I give it to them, because very often they were the ones posing the questions. So in many respects, the projects that they did were defined based on questions that they themselves determined, and I think going through that process I saw firsthand how involved those students got, and over years when students go through the course, they tend to get stressed and say, I don't like this and it's a lot of work, and the usual thing you hear from students. But once they graduated and come back and I'd check in on them or I'd meet them at an event like this, very often they'd come back and say, well, actually this was all the employer wanted to talk about when I went to a job interview, or I'm now hiring people and it's actually people who have things on their CV outside of grades that they're the kind of things we look for now. So very often, the way I view it now is very much thinking about what can I do to help a student build a portfolio, because the grades are going to get them in the interview. But once they get into the interview, what's going to get them the job? And very often it's showing transverse skills that go beyond what you'll learn in a typical module descriptor or the learning outcomes that you'll stipulate. It's that experience of dealing with uncertainty and embracing more of the real world, I guess, in the classroom.
I love that idea of coming out with more rounded individuals out of university than just focusing on the research and the core curriculum.
Well, often the criticism of universities are that students come out and they're book smart, they're very academic, but it takes a year to get them into a situation where they know how an organisation works. And modern companies are, as you know, global. You're not dealing with local teams anymore. And I've been blessed because in Trinity there are programs at master's level where students get the opportunity to collaborate with universities in other countries. And also companies in other countries, and you learn firsthand what works and what doesn't. So when you do approach a problem or a project, you have many of the skills from the get-go that allow you to solve it. You don't have to go into an organisation and go through a grad program for a year where you're like a pinball moving around to different departments, learning the run of the place. A lot of those skills should be taught now at university, because I think university has been quite traditional for very long. There's a lot of modernisation can be done, and hopefully through courses like the ones I've helped bring, we can tighten the gap between universities and industry.
Yeah, I presume this is music to your ears, Brendan, when you're talking about changing the programs and redesigning them and transforming how you deliver. I would imagine a lot of this is the type of thing in your head.
Absolutely, and I suppose in our sector within Ireland, that's something we've been doing for a very long time. Our student cohorts tend to, I suppose, be inherently more diverse. As you know, places on programs in universities across Ireland are allocated on a competitive basis based on academic attainment through our second level system, which is quite limited in terms of funneling particular kinds of students with particular strengths to the high demand courses. And in our sector, we tend to get a wider diversity of people. So we have, as we've developed, had to be very creative in looking at different kinds of models and the kinds of approaches Conor spoke about in terms of delivering that education to our people, our students. So to give you some example, and coming back to what I said about experiences earlier, I was down in our campus in Tala in South Dublin a couple of weeks ago, and the mechanical engineering students there work on projects with a couple of charities. So they do things like they 3D print very cheap prosthetic limbs for children, which are quite expensive to buy in the commercial market, and they do it in they learn those skills of what's required to make these things work. But they're doing it, they're meeting the children, they're doing the measurements. And the lecturers there tell me those students come in at night, they come in at the weekends, they come in during their summer holiday, because they're so engaged in the seeing at first hand the impact of what they're learning on real people. And I suppose that's something that I think we could mainstream a little bit more in Ireland and across the world indeed, because there are lots of innovative approaches to education, particularly in STEM. So if you look at UL's immersive software engineering approach, where students are spending a lot of time working in companies, there's even more radical models, say in the US with iron range engineering, where students spend vast majority of their time working in a company, and the lecturers in the university are kind of guides, and their role is very different. So I think we will see in the years ahead, and probably accelerated by the pandemic, a lot of innovation in universities in Ireland and across the world. And I do think it will allow us to generate the graduates who are just much more at ease with a much more dynamic and changing and challenging environment.
I love it, and it's appropriately enough. I wanted to ask Lisa about this, because when it comes to excellence in academia and research, I'd love to hear a bit more about the role of the SFI Centres for Research Training. Tell us more.
Yeah, so the SFI Centres for Research Training, it's a relatively new initiative in the last couple of years. And, you know, in the design of that programme, we did kind of, working with our parent department, did widespread consultation on identifying really areas of greatest skills needs. And the first set of Centres for Research Training were in the area of, a very broad area of data and ICT skills. We ended up funding 6 Centres for Research Training. And through the course of those programmes, that will result in more than 700 postgraduates being trained in those areas. And I suppose the difference in the approach that we're taking vis-a-vis other programs that SFI has launched in the past is this is very much cohort-based approaches, bringing the students in together, developing that rounded student. I mean others on the panel are involved in some of these training centres, but giving them additional skills, so giving them that access to where the real needs are, problem solving, interdisciplinarity. And I think there's a very strong sense of ownership then when these groups are actually working together. So there's a lot more that they can achieve over and above. They still need to produce their masters and PhDs to the same level of excellence, but there's a lot more that can be given as well. So we funded 6 of those centres to date, interinstitutional across Ireland.
And just before I move on from you as well, you might just tell us a little bit about, you know, we were talking about sort of that engagement with the wider community, just the Creating the Future initiative.
Thank you for that opportunity. So Creating Our Future is a national campaign run by our parent department, further in higher education, research, innovation and science. It's been managed by Science Foundation Ireland in partner with other groups. And what it is it's a large-scale campaign that gives an opportunity for members of the public across the board in all sectors, in all parts of the country, to have a conversation with researchers across all areas. This is not just about STEM, SFR coordinating it, but this is very importantly in all areas of research. We want to listen to what the general public would like their taxpayers' money to be spent on, what areas are important to them, where do they feel that research may have a role to play. So we're collating all these ideas. The campaign is open now. We're very keen for people. There's a website, people can go on and put their ideas in there. But very importantly, it will be what we do with what comes through at the end of this. And some of it will result potentially in creating greater levels of awareness in particular areas for research that's already ongoing, and pushing it out there and having that dialogue. Others will enable us to focus in particular areas. I mean, another area that we can talk about is challenge-based funding. Yeah. That's an opportunity where we can, I suppose, a temperature check on the general public to kind of see what's important for them. And it's such a perfect time, I suppose, to run this campaign, considering the following the pandemic, I guess that science and engineering and other areas of social sciences are very much, there's a very strong awareness at the moment.
Just tell us very quickly what you mean by challenge-based funding. I know what it is, but just for our viewers.
Yeah, so absolutely, I'd be delighted to. So challenge-based funding is, I guess, a new way of funding research that SFI is now has entered into in the last few years. It's very much complementary to other methods of other ways of funding research. It's not to take the place of other types of research grants. It's a solution-focused approach to funding research, very much like the comments made by Conor around problem solving, critical development of critical thinking skills, and that's very much at the core of challenge-based research. It's very much about enabling researchers and engineers, obviously for SFI, very much focused on STEM-based solutions, to work very closely with the end users of the research and to have that constant validation of what they're doing. Is this really what people want? Is this going to work? Am I going to be able to actually deploy this solution and do that in an accelerated way? We've had a number of initiatives to date, but next year we're actually going to be ramping up those activities very much in the area of green transition and digital transformation under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So this is something that we're very excited about, and it's very much about engagement of the research community, but also of across government to identify where best we can place our efforts.
We've come full circle there. It's great to hear that about on the sustainability and the green technology side. That's really interesting. Time is flying by, so I want to come back to yourself, Sarah Jane. I do, and it's one of the themes of the panel that I do want to get into a little bit. It harks back a little bit to the previous panel, but it's that idea of how do we create an education system at second, third, fourth research level that is properly inclusive of what are the sort of things we need to be doing, and what is some of the sort of things you're involved in, including, I believe, with Huawei.
Yeah, well, I suppose thinking about computer science and I mean, there's such a lack of diversity in certainly the students that are coming in at second level or third level, and a lot of that is driven really from a lot of what was said in the last panel about, you know, girls' expectations or their belief in what they can achieve, or even their openness to examples of role models and all that. But I mean, I suppose my focus has really been at third level, and one of the projects that we're working on at the moment is funded by the Gender Enhancement Equality Fund and also by Huawei Ireland. And what we're looking at, there's a lot of research out there along the whole pipeline from sort of primary school, secondary school, third level, and then keeping girls in IT and computer science the whole way up even to in industry and then on to lecturing in academia and research. And there's a lot of research out there, and what we're trying to focus on is gathering it together and identifying from it best practice, and then making that available to other HEIs and that, because I suppose it's applied research if you want to look at it like that, but there is a lot of that research focuses on one little thing and then another paper on another little thing and what people did. What we need to do is understand this at a wider level and provide it in a mechanism that allows people to sort of say, yeah, I could try that, you know, I could try this. So we have a TechMate project is what we're calling it, and at the moment we're just looking at the best practice, and then we hope to produce an artifact which will be available online. We don't really know what it's going to look like yet, but and it will publish and promote the practices that have been shown to have positive impact. And then the problem then is to get it out there. But we have Ireland is very lucky, I suppose. The HEIs in Ireland have all come together through. It was founded by a colleague of mine in TU Dublin and another colleague of mine in UCD, where they set up a network called Ingenic, which is 18 or so HEIs in Ireland have representatives on it. And the focus is to promote gender balance in computer science and technology for students and staff. And it's just a network. It provides you access to other people. We work on initiatives together. And we're going to use that network then to promote this and to try to encourage, well, you know, computer science, technology-based courses around in Ireland nationally to try some of these best practices. So that's the plan, but we'll see how it goes.
You have to be ambitious. I love it. I love it. I'm going to skip you, Conor, because I want to come back to you on something else slightly different. If you don't mind me asking you, Brendan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were the first, we were talking about male allies earlier, and I think you were the first man on the Athena Swan committee in your previous institution?
Yes, I was, and I suppose Athena Swan is a framework which universities in the UK and Ireland are using to improve their culture around equality, diversity and inclusion. And it provides a very structured frameworks where universities can analyse what the issues are internally at the moment and put in place actions and over time change the culture so that we end up in a better place. So there was, I suppose, my own background as an engineer and especially in communications networks, which is probably more male-dominated than any other area of engineering. In my earliest stages of my career, it just was normal to me that I was always surrounded by men. And it was slowly over time this realization dawned when I see some of the issues around culture in groups or designing solutions that didn't take full account, that were designed for white males like myself and not for everyone. So that kind of encouraged me to volunteer in my old institution to sit on the Athena Swan Ireland panel. And it was quite a striking thing going to the first meeting in UL and being a little bit late because I got delayed in traffic and walking into a room and there being 30 women in the room. And that was in my mid-40s, the very first time that had happened to me. And it really struck me that, well, my women colleagues that I work with face this issue all of the time. So I think the whole issue is it's not at all about fixing women. It is about, it's more about men and more about us realise the ingrained privileges that we have, especially as white males. And changing that culture so that we start to see these things and we start to take on board that our behaviour is so important. And it really takes leadership within organisations like universities, and I suppose it's a role of a university to be a beacon in this regard for society, and the universities in Ireland are certainly taking on that. But I think there's a lot of work to spread that across industry and all kinds of organisations.
It's great to see now that we have a bunch of the provost of your university is a woman, and we have women in leadership in academia now, which when I started out it was unheard of, it's progress. Conor, I'm going to come back to you because we are going to have to wrap up, and I do want to ask you what that idea of not leaving out anyone behind. Tell me your own thoughts on that.
Well, I think, one of the big responsibilities that we have in teaching engineering in university is that, we're going to be the people who design technology of the future. And as was just mentioned, very often those decisions get made by, a privileged few. So making sure that we're not leaving people behind is a responsibility. It's an ethical duty that I think engineers have to take, so that, when we're teaching, when we're actually becoming practitioners ourselves, that we understand that actually, we're not just building this for us, we're building this for everyone. And even if there are people who don't have STEM backgrounds or are marginalised by society, these are key stakeholders are going to need to use it, and how can we involve them in the development, right from the idea way through to implementation. And I think, me personally, we've tried to do this in the project we've worked on, whether that's developing robots that support older people. We saw when we first started to do this that many older people felt stigmatized by bringing a robot in, and trying to actually understand how can we frame this to them so they see it as empowering. And similarly now, when we're developing technology for a part of the workforce that hasn't traditionally used technology. The fact that we're bringing in a piece of machinery that's worth, 100,000 euros, they feel like, maybe this is going to replace me. How can we make them feel confident that actually, we're trying to give you a technology that will create new pathways for you. So in order for us to be able to do that, it requires a meaningful engagement from day one. But again, these are not the kind of things that get taught traditionally on a STEM curriculum. So trying to be able to kind of infuse that sense of individual responsibility, I think is key.
Last word to you, Lisa, on that side of inclusion and accessibility of this level of education.
Yeah, well, I suppose a couple of things, conscious of time. As I mentioned at the outset, SFI does focus very much also on early stages of education, and certainly we have a number of initiatives where we place very strong focus on inclusivity and on ensuring that underrepresented groups are part of those programs. And I think that's critically important that we get in at a very early stage. So there isn't that sense of this isn't for me, this isn't a career for me. So that's very important that we keep up those activities. I mean, also just to mention, kind of on the other side of things, on challenge-based funding, you know, we're working very closely, very aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. We've got a great partnership now with Irish Aid, where we're looking not only at developing new technologies in that context, but very much including people from developing countries in those teams at the core. So again, looking at it from two different perspectives.
Well, look, once again, so thought-provoking. We only touched on the issues, but I hope people will seek you out to question you further on this. But can I say thanks a million for your insights there. So Lisa, Brendan, Connor, Sarah Jane, thank you so much. And I let you, I lead you off the stage there. Thank you so much. So I'll be back to talk to you in a moment, but we're getting to the close of the event now at this stage. So I want to let you all escape for a little bite of lunch. So let me leave you with a few words from the CEO of Huawei Ireland, Tony Yangshu. Tony Yangshu.
Thank you, Anne. And hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be here to join the Huawei Ireland's European Innovation Day today. And thanks for everyone to join us today. We had some very insightful and informative discussion today. I would like to thank in particular the Lord Mayor and Minister O'Brien for taking time out of the extremely tight schedule today to join us earlier this morning. The Innovation Day tackles one of the greatest challenges for the world and company alike, sustainability. We at Huawei know that achieving the world's sustainability goals will be helped by digital technologies, as shown in Amarak's news report, Ireland's digital path to sustainability. Amarak's research calculated that digitalization could deliver up to 40% reduction in carbon emissions needed to meet Ireland's 2030 targets. Huawei's own innovation technologies offer a window into this green, digital-led future we believe in. We will manage watts with bits. Low-carbon power solutions like smart PV, clean energy, and integrated smart solutions will support sustainable operations and reduce carbon emissions. This will all aid Ireland and the European Union's ambitious net zero carbon emission targets for 2050. Such targets cannot, however, be met without effective and diverse leadership. That's why today we are proud to also feature contributions from some of Ireland's most prominent female leaders. I would like to thank Dublin Chamber for co-hosting today's such a successful and safe event here in Dublin Castle in these challenging pandemic areas. I applaud the Chamber's continuous commitment to leverage its Irish business network in helping to reduce carbon emission through digital technologies. Finally, it is important to support the next generation of talent because these young, ambitious, and creative minds are our future and our future digital sustainability pioneers. I am proud today that we have extended our Tech for Her scholarship program to UCC, who will join UCD and TU Dublin in offering scholarships to female students studying STEM. Developing the next generation of female leaders in STEM will help future accelerate our search in climate change solutions. Later this year, we will also acknowledge the great achievements of Irish students who graduated from our 2021 Seeds for the Future program. This program allows Irish STEM students to develop their understanding of the ICT industry, and it is a cornerstone of Huawei's talent projects globally. Again, finally, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you.
So time to send you all on your way. Thank you so much to the Lord Mayor, Minister, all of those who were present in the room today, although it's a very limited number. Thanks to all those who tuned in from home or from work. Big well done to Huawei and Dublin Chamber for organising what I think was quite a thought-provoking and informative event on such really crucial topics as sustainability and the role of ICT, female leadership and excellence and accessibility in STEM education. So I just want to say thanks a million again to Huawei and Dublin Chamber for a great morning, and we hope to see you soon in person. Take care all.